My name is Bill Pacala. I'm with Nikon Professional Services, and I'm going to be your host today and your instructor. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Air National Guard and Nikon to the D1 Quick Start. The D1 being the Nikon digital SLR camera that has recently been added into your equipment locker. We would like to accomplish several things today, but before we get started, I'd like you to know that we are broadcasting live from the McGee-Tyson Air National Guard base here just outside Knoxville. To give you an idea of how the program is going to run today, we're going to do approximately 50 minutes of instruction, at which time I will go over the D1 and hopefully bring you up to speed to where you can take the camera and take it out on daily assignments. We'll have a short little break after we go through the primary part of the instruction, and then after that we'll come back and do approximately a 30-minute live question and answer session. During that live question and answer session, you will be able to email or phone in. It'll be a live phone connection. You'll be able to phone in your questions. We'll give you that number as we go to the break. In the meantime, if you do have questions, you can go ahead and fax them to us. The fax number here is DSN 266-3880. That's DSN 266-3880. You also could help us out a lot today and help the Air National Guard in general with their programming. If you would drop an email note to Master Sergeant Mavi Smith, her email address is there on the bottom of your screen, and let us know that you're watching. Please do us a favor though, in the subject line, please put only the words Nikon Broadcast. That'll separate that email and it'll come directly to Mavi, and she'll know that you're out there and tuned in and watching us today. On behalf of Nikon, welcome. As I said, I'm the General Manager of Nikon Professional Services, and we are here today to bring you some live training on the new digital SLR camera, the Nikon D1. We have several goals we'd like to accomplish today. One, I want you to get familiar with the operation of the camera. I know most of you may just be to a point where you're taking it out of the box. The purpose of today is to simply get you familiar with it, kind of get past that anxiety that you have anytime you have a new camera. We want you to understand the control structure on the camera, but more importantly, how those controls actually affect the photographs that you will be taking with it. And then the primary goal today, of course, is to get you to a point where you can efficiently use the D1 in your daily work. You will find that the camera itself is pretty easy to use. It's intimidating at first when you first look at it, but once you pick it up, you will find that we have basically divided the camera into two types of operation. What I like to refer to as the camera-ness. And the camera-ness, for those of you that are photographers and have an active interest in photography and use it and do your daily work, you will find that the control structure on the camera is very similar to the cameras that you are already using. Now, that is a big help in the sense that you don't have to relearn shutter speeds and apertures and things like that. You'll find that all of that stuff applies, and that's part of the camera-ness. As far as the digital part of it goes, the digitalness is really more for the client. And that digitalness is usually told that you're going to have to shoot this on digital in order to be able to transmit the photograph back quickly and with less fuss. One of the things that photographers get into in the field, and especially people in the armed services, is the need to carry darkrooms with them and things like that. The whole digital process has changed that a lot, so we don't really have to worry about that too much. You'll find that there is a degree of automation on the camera. In fact, it can be completely automatic or it can be completely manual. And in fact, you'll find that in real-world situations, you generally either get plenty of time and can apply the knowledge and expertise that you have, but many times you have to trade off that knowledge and expertise and controlling every factor of the photograph in hopes of meeting time constraints. Sometimes when things are changing fast-changing lighting situations, you get into a situation where sometimes the automation is going to help you. If you do have the knowledge and experience, you'll find that you can completely control every aspect of this camera. That would be the autofocus. You can turn it off and focus manually. You can control the exposure and exactly how you want to render the scene exposure-wise. You certainly have control over the flash, and a new control that we'll talk about a little bit later on called color control, but even it too can be controlled manually if you need to do that. If the knowledge and experience doesn't work for you because of a fast-changing situation where you have a time constraint, then all of a sudden you'll find that there is some help available to you built right into the camera. Focusing can be completely automatic, and it will focus and let you fire at up to 4.5 frames per second, so it will certainly follow moving subjects without any problem whatsoever. You have several choices of automation when it comes to the exposure. You can have total programmed mode exposure, which would be aperture and shutter priority. In other words, you just simply point it and push the button and it will pick the proper aperture and shutter speed. You have total automation on the color control in a lot of cases, and that color control we're going to talk about a little bit later on. That's really called white balance, and that is something that is going to be a new term if you haven't done much in the way of digital photography. And of course, we even have automated flash systems that will let you bypass all of the effort that you used to have to put into flash. I know myself personally, when someone would ask about flash, I would say, well, you know, I'm really more of an available light shooter, and that's just not really what I do. And it was really because I simply didn't know about flash. So that help is available there. If you do have the knowledge and experience, of course, you can go on from that. There is some terminology you're going to need to know. That terminology, when I talk about changing controls on this camera, I'm going to refer to pushing a button and turning a dial. The dial under your thumb in the back is called the command dial. So we might push a button and turn the command dial, and you'll see the graphic there. We may, on the other hand, push a button and turn the sub-command dial, and that would be under your index finger. Just so that you don't get those confused, I will kind of go over those because that is the entire operation of the camera. And in fact, when you're in the manual exposure mode, the command dial actually operates your shutter speed, and the sub-command dial becomes your aperture ring. So you no longer have to actually change the apertures manually using your left hand. The first thing that you really need to know when you start talking about digital is there is a little bit of different effect that you get when you put lenses on it. So those of you that are used to using a particular focal length of lens and all of a sudden put it on a digital camera, what you see through the viewfinder is a little bit different than what you would normally see through the viewfinder. And in fact, there's some terminology out there that's kind of bantered about where people will say, oh yes, I'm using digital, therefore I'm really getting a magnification of my focal length. Well, I'm sorry. I wish we had the magic formula that when you put a lens on a camera that we could magically make it longer for you, but we don't. If you put a 300 millimeter lens on the camera, it is still a 300 millimeter lens. The aspect ratio that we're talking about, though, is the same, but you will find that it's cropped differently. So if you take a look at this graphic right here, you'll see the reference in the relationship between a 35 millimeter piece of film and the CCD, that's a charge couple device, that's what CCD stands for, that's built into the D1. And I want you to see how close it is in physical size to that 35 millimeter frame. So we don't get much of a, quote, magnification factor. What we really are doing is cropping the image about 35%. Don't get that confused with the smaller CCDs that are used in consumer digital cameras that you find out there. Those are the little point and shoot type of cameras. Also very worthwhile little products and certainly have their place, but don't have the versatility that you would get with a digital SLR camera, SLR meaning single lens reflex camera. If we take a look here, you'll see that if you were to shoot this photograph and use a 35 millimeter camera, the film itself is approximately 24 by 36 millimeters. And if you were to do this with digital, you're not really magnifying the subject. You're actually cropping it a little bit tighter, which gives you a visual magnification in the viewfinder because you don't see quite as much. And I think that's where that terminology comes from when people say, oh yes, it magnified the focal length of the lens. You're really cropping, and you're cropping approximately 33% out of the frame. So you're only using 65% of what that lens was really capable of seeing. Now, the first thing we want you to do is to set the clock, and yes, there is a clock in the camera. The reason that you need to set the clock is many-fold, but primarily because that information from the clock does become part of the file and therefore stays with the file. First thing you do is make sure that the camera is turned on, and then you will notice that there are two buttons that you will need to push. One is a bracketing button. It'll be over under your left finger, and the little plus and minus compensation dial under the right finger. And if you push and hold those down for approximately 3 seconds, you're going to find that the year will blink. Now, those of you that have just taken the camera out of the box, that year is probably going to be correct. When it was packed at the factory, the clock was set. Unfortunately, the factory is 14 hours ahead of the Eastern time zone here, so we are going to have to change sometimes the day and sometimes certainly the hour. So if you would then just simply, once it's blinking, push the plus and minus compensation button, you will get to the month. The month should be accurate. If it's not, you use the command dial, that's the one under your thumb, and you turn it until you get to the proper month. You push the little plus and minus compensation button again, and the day will blink. The day may or may not be correct, depending on where you're at. Push it again, and you'll get to the hour, and it is a 24-hour clock. And push it one more time, and you can change the minute. All of those numbers easily changeable up or down, so you can go forward or back by simply rotating the command dial to the left or to the right. Once that clock is set, and you might wonder why we want to set the clock, that's because, as I said, the date does become part of the finished file. That finished file will include all sorts of information that the camera passes on besides the actual photographic information, such as the focal length of the lens, the shutter speed that you took the picture at, and a whole raft of information that you'll be able to review anytime that you look at those photographs. And it also allows you to easily identify when that shot was taken. Once you identify when that shot was taken, it certainly helps you put things in its proper sequence. Now, what I've tried to do today, you'll notice that the tag coming into this program was a quick start. We've tried to break the operation of the camera down into 8 easy steps, and you're going to see 5 of them here in just a second. Those 5 steps are ones that might be sort of new to you. And then additionally, there will be 3 other steps which, as a photographer, you perform just about every day. The very first thing we want you to do is to charge the battery. The battery in this camera is a nickel metal hydride battery. It was packed fresh at the factory. You don't know how long the battery has been in the camera, so I'm going to ask that you charge that battery before you go on. We'll go into each of these steps in greater detail. After that, you would simply insert a memory card. That's sort of like loading film into your camera, only in the case of this camera, it's a compact flash card. You will set the image quality. That's the file size, and yes, the camera does give you choices in the size of the file that it will give you, and it'll give you a choice as to whether that file is compressed or not compressed. We'll then certainly select the sensitivity. That's a fancy word for ISO or ASA, depending on your age and how long you've been doing this. The ISO in this camera gives you several choices, and then we'll set the white balance. And we're going to spend some time on this white balance issue, because white balance, if you have not been doing digital, is really like choosing the right film to match the right light, and we'll go into that in detail also. The following 3 areas, setting the focus style, setting the metering, and certainly setting the exposure mode, are things that you now do no matter what camera you're using, and you're going to find that those are exactly the same on a digital camera as they would be on a film camera. Okay, so let's talk about this battery for a second. Charging the battery, it is a quick release battery. Battery very quickly comes out of the camera. It's a 1-piece unit. Drop in, give it a half turn, and lock it. These batteries are nickel metal hydride, and if you treat them properly, you're going to find that they will treat you properly. The charger itself has a button on it called a refresh button, and it's not a button that you need to use often, but I am going to ask that you refresh that battery the first 3 times you use it. Now, what the refresh process does is it takes the level in that battery and it lowers it to the lowest safe voltage without damaging the battery, and then builds it up from there back to a full charge. So what that really does is exercise the battery. And I'm going to ask that you do that with a new battery, or if it hasn't been used for a while, the next 3 nights or the next 3 times you charge it. And I do recommend that you might want to do it at night, or do it first thing in the morning if you're not going to be using it, because it does, depending on the charge of the battery, can take as much as 8 full hours in order to do that. And then in order to make sure that that battery is exercised properly, I'm going to also ask that you do that about every 5 to 7 charges. If you will do that every 5 to 7 charges and exercise that battery, the number of shots you'll get out of that battery will grow drastically to a point where you'll get 4 or 5 and sometimes even 600 shots from a single charge. That's the kind of life you should expect from the battery. All of that, of course, being dependent on how much you use the autofocus, how much you use the built-in LCD viewing screen that's built into the camera, and things like that. All of those things draw battery power. We want you to also use that battery until you get the half battery indicator on the upper LCD panel. When you get that half battery indicator, that's kind of a visual warning to you, the photographer, that you should be thinking about the fact that you better have a spare battery ready to use pretty quick, because you're not going to be able to take too many more shots after that before you get to the point where it will just simply stop working. I said we don't use film in this camera, and we don't. You need to insert a memory card in the camera. The memory card is easily inserted in the back. There is a little thumb hole. You simply lift the little door, push a little button, and this flops open. You can see a little bit closer shot, I think, here in the graphic. The memory card goes into the camera. It is a single compact flash card, and it can be a Type 1 or Type 2. Simply inserts in the little slot. There is a logo on the card, as you can see there in the graphic, and that logo should be pointing as you're behind the camera to the right-hand side of the camera. Pretty hard to put them in wrong, and if you have to do this and use any force at all, then you're really doing something wrong. Once that memory card is in the camera, you're ready to shoot. Now, these memory cards can come in any capacity from just a few megabytes on up to over 300 megabytes for these solid-state memory card devices. Which you choose will be dependent really on the types of files that you might want to be saving. And as I said, you have a choice of several different types of files, and those files take up different size spaces and different amounts of memory. Because of that, the larger the file, obviously the less images you would get on any given card. Next thing that I said you needed to do was set that image quality, and that image quality gives you the chance to control whether you're shooting in color or black and white. And yes, I know you can take a color image and convert it after the fact in Photoshop to a monochrome or a black and white, but you can also choose to do that in the camera, so it would save that post-production work. If you knew that you wanted black and white and only black and white, you can actually set the camera to record black and white. Then you choose the file type. And this camera does give you 5 fully finished file types out of the camera, 3 different levels of JPEG, JPEG being the Joint Expert Photographic Group, and they have come up with standards that allow computer programs to condense photographs or compress the image. We give you 3 different types of JPEGs. 2 different types of TIFF images, TIFF meaning tagged image file format. TIFF images are standard style files, and both JPEG and TIFF can be opened with virtually any graphics package out there, including Adobe Photoshop and many others. So they're standard files. You don't need to acquire them. For those of you that have been using older digital cameras, you just simply File, Open, go to the File Open portion of the menu and open those types of files. There is a 6th type of file, which we're not going to spend a lot of time on today. That's called the raw image, and that is really the raw data unprocessed off the CCD. And in order to open that file, you would need an extra piece of optional software called Nikon Capture. It does give you a lot of extra features and lets you to really manipulate that image after the fact. But if you don't have that Nikon Capture software, you really can't even open that file. So we've really made it difficult for you to accidentally shoot raw images. And later on, when we get into custom settings, we'll talk a little bit about the custom setting that allows you to get into that raw data capture mode. That image quality is simply selected by pushing the quality button on the back of the camera and rotating that command dial, that's the one under your thumb, and turning that until you see the type of file that you want. Here's a little graphic that will show you the number of images and the types of images that this camera is capable of giving you. We could go to that graphic, please. Okay, thank you very much. You'll notice that when the data comes off of the CCD and first comes out of the camera, as you follow that over to the right-hand side, you have a TIFF RGB, and you'll notice that that is approximately 7.5 megs for each picture. So if you're shooting in the TIFF mode, you will find that you're going to need some cards that are pretty decent in size. The TIFF YCBCR is a lesser-known type of file, but nonetheless equal in quality, and it does save you a little bit of recording space. It's a 5.2 meg file. The 1:4 JPEG, that's in our camera called a JPEG Fine, and I really wouldn't, if you're going to do any printing at all, shoot in any quality below a 1:4 JPEG. So JPEG Fine is really my chosen file format most of the time. It gives me very good quality, able to make large prints up to 11 by 14 and 16 by 20 without seeing a lot of breakdown of the image, but at the same time allows me to put quite a few of them on a card because each of them takes up approximately 1.2 megs. 1:8 JPEG or 1:16 JPEG, we call that JPEG Normal and JPEG Fine, JPEG Normal and JPEG Basic. We would only use those if we were shooting for web production and they were not going to be viewed on anything other than your TV monitor or your computer monitor screen. The raw data, you could capture it, and that of course gives you, as I said, some extra options. Remember, you do need that extra piece of Nikon software to do that, called Nikon Capture. It does allow you to save that as an 8-bit RGB TIFF file, but you can also interpolate a little bit and go up to a 15 megabyte file. So if you're doing something that has an awful lot of fine detail and wanted to maintain as much of that detail as possible, then the TIFF RGB 16 megabyte file might have an attraction for you. Image quality mode, as I said, when you rotate the command dial holding the quality button down, you will cycle through JPEG Fine, JPEG Normal, JPEG Basic. Those are the files that are compressed, and you will be using those most of the time. The uncompressed, of course, would show up as high or RGB or YCBCR on the back of the camera. And then the raw data, again, requiring that Nikon Capture. I don't want you to accidentally go out and shoot images in that raw data mode with your camera and then find out that you can't open them. So temporarily, I would suggest that we just stay away from the raw data until you get a little bit more experience behind the camera and end up working with it to a point where you feel real comfortable with it. These high quality files, of course, are not compressed. They take up massive amounts of space, but they are your finest file quality that you can get out of the D1. Now, the frames that you'll get on a card will vary depending on the size of the card. I have put some frames on this graphic for you that will simply show you what you get on a 96 meg card. 96 meg card is reasonably priced and a reasonable size card. And in fact, I'm a firm believer of using more smaller cards rather than big storage devices. A 96 meg card shooting in JPEG Fine is about like shooting 2 rolls of film, pretty close to it. So you'll find that if you're the type of photographer that goes out and shoots 1 or 2 rolls of film on an assignment and then likes to view those images right away, obviously JPEG Fine on a 96 meg or 128 meg card would be very similar style of operation to shooting that way. Okay? Basic, normal, fine, high uncompressed, and high uncompressed TIFF, all of those files available to you. The sensitivity control we talked about, of course, was the ISO value of the camera, and although it's done electronically, you will find that it is identical as far as you as a photographer is concerned to the sensitivity ratings of films at ISO 200, 400, 800, and 1600. You do have those 4 choices. We also give you, by way of a custom setting that we'll talk about a little bit later on, for those real low light situations, we'll give you the option of being able to bump that ISO. When you're at 1600, we'll be able to bump it up to 32 and 6400, keeping in mind that the higher the ISO, obviously the less image quality, and generally the more noise that sneaks into the image, noise being an interference type of pattern that will show up first, of course, in dark shadows and in black areas. That ISO equivalency, as I said, 200, 400, 800, and 1600, very easy for most photographers to deal with because it does follow the same sensitivity that you would get if you were putting films of those ISOs in a film camera. Do want to spend some time now talking about white balance. White balance is an issue that if you've not done much in the way of digital photography at all, it's something new that you're going to have to learn about. White balance is an adjustment for the color of the light that you're taking the picture under. It would be, I guess, best equated to simply picking the right type of film to match the light. As a photographer, if you're shooting in daylight, you'd put a daylight balanced film. Also, as a photographer, we've had very limited choices in film. If you were shooting under tungsten lighting, that's that solid, what we sometimes refer to as hot lights. If you're shooting under that kind of lighting, you might, for instance, on film cameras, choose a type B film. In digital photography, all of that goes away. You have a choice of many, many different types of film. In other words, you have a camera basically that has all of the filtration built into it for you. And that's a real pleasure to work with. It does allow you to take whatever the color of the spectrum is and actually balance the camera so that you can capture that image with the right color balance. Something that as film photographers we have not been able to do in the past without using and carrying an awful lot of filters with us. The visible spectrum that we see, of course, goes from about 400 nanometers to about 700 nanometers. The color temperature of light goes well below, and the color temperature of light is actually rated in degrees Kelvin. That goes all the way back to Lord Kelvin, for those of you that really want to go back and study your photography basics a little bit. It was a way of rating the color of light from just a dark amber glow of something, which would be a very low temperature Kelvin, all the way up to really high noon daylight on the top of a mountain, could be up as much as 10 or 11,000 degrees Kelvin. Tungsten light bulb that would be in your home where you would turn on a lamp, for instance, is generally in the range of about 2,800 to about 3,000 degrees Kelvin. Fluorescent tubes. And you can be fooled by fluorescent tubes. This studio that I'm sitting in right now is lit by fluorescent tubes, but they're daylight balanced fluorescent tubes. So we'll talk a little bit more about fluorescent and the problems that you do run into it. The color temperature itself is something that you generally have no control over. The camera is what gives you the control because it allows you to set the color rendition in the camera to match the color of the light that you're working under. We're shooting in an office situation. You might find that there was an abundance of fluorescent light. Most fluorescent light, unless they're special fluorescent tubes, generally are pretty green. They're simply a spectrum minus a lot of red. And because of that, when you shoot under those kind of lights, if you did it with daylight film, you would certainly get a green cast. So if you did it with a D1 set at the daylight white balance setting, you would get a similar green cast. Nice thing about the D1, instead of having to put a filter on it, you can simply dial in a white balance for fluorescent tubes and make that correction without having to actually put filters on the front of the camera. That's a real pleasure to work with, and especially in the fluorescent light, because there really was no film that was balanced for fluorescent. You either use daylight film with some type of filter on it, or you use type B with some other type of filter on it. Don't need to worry about that when you're shooting that D1 digital camera. The white balance in the D1 is TTL. TTL meaning that it is through the lens. So you can actually be inside shooting outside with this camera and not worry about it, because the automated white balance, and there is an automatic setting. Remember I said if you have time and knowledge, then you certainly might want to choose it individually. But if you do have time constraints, then you might want to actually let the camera choose it for you. There is an auto white balance setting. So you could actually stand inside under tungsten light shooting out a window and your color balance will be correct, because the camera will actually balance that and take that reading through the lens. And that's what TTL really means. In order to set the white balance, again, it's a button and a dial. You simply hold down the white balance button, turning the command dial, that's the one under your thumb, as you're sitting there holding the camera, and you will rotate through several different settings. The auto setting is anywhere from about 4,200 degrees Kelvin, so that's just about fluorescent light on out through any kind of normal daylight that you would run into. And in fact, the important thing to remember is that auto is going to work fine for you 99% of the time when you are outside. The mindset when you move inside needs to be that I have to take a little extra time and take some control of this and choose a white balance setting, because 4,200 is the bottom end of that automatic setting. So if you move inside and you move into tungsten light, as you can see on the screen, illuminated by that little, what looks like a little symbol of a light bulb, incandescent light would be approximately 3,000 degrees Kelvin. Now, while you're holding that white balance button down, you can, besides turning that back command dial, you could turn the front sub-command dial, and you will notice that you have little increments from +3 to -3 to fine-tune each of these adjustments. So the incandescent setting isn't just 3,000. It's 3,000 +1 +2 +3, -1 -2 -3. So you have 7 different incandescent settings that will enable you to really nail that white balance perfectly. The better you do this in the camera, then the better you're going to be and the less time you're going to have to spend in post-production work. The fluorescent setting is about 4,200 degrees Kelvin, and again, ±3 clicks, so you do have some control over that. Direct sunlight, which looks like the symbol of the sun, about 5,200 degrees Kelvin. A flash setting, about 5,400 degrees Kelvin. An overcast sky, about 6,000 degrees Kelvin. There's a lot of extra blue light in that overcast sky. And then, of course, in deep shade, that's standing in the shade of a building on a really bright sunny day, a lot of blue light there. And we get into a situation where the Kelvin temperature can be 7,000 and above. Okay, TTL white balance. What I'd like to do is give you a little exercise and have you go out and just simply take the same shot, purposely going through all of those white balance settings, regardless of how you're shooting, Go through each one of them and then look at the resulting files and see what they look like. And that's what I've done in this next graphic that's coming up. This is the same shot taken with 6 different settings, one of them being auto. And if you look at auto, because we were outside, you'll notice that auto and sunny and even cloudy start looking pretty much similar to each other. And that's because it was a sunny day. So I would expect auto to do a good job. I really nailed it best with sunny. And if you look at sunny and auto, they're very close to each other. Okay? That'll give you an exercise. That'll tell you what you can go out and do. And at the same time, give you a little exercise in controlling white balance and seeing where it goes and what happens to it. Basically, you'll find that once you do this and you start getting a handle on it, again, let me reiterate, the mindset needs to be, if you're outside, auto works great. The moment you come in a building, you really need to be thinking a little bit more about white balance and controlling it individually. Now, that can also be tricky. If you are in a building and you see a lot of tungsten light, obviously your mindset would be, gee, this must be a tungsten setting. I think I'll choose that incandescent setting and set the white balance, as in the courthouse here in Salt Lake City. Now, the problem with that, of course, is I didn't take into account a huge skylight. So you really have to think through this a little bit. White balance is a new control to a lot of you. And in fact, the tungsten light setting, by choosing it, I was telling it that there was a lot of red in the light. There really wasn't. And the resulting image that you're looking at, of course, is very blue. Had I taken into account the skylight and said, oh, this is simply a daylight shot, in fact, I could have done this in auto or any one of the daylight settings, and you'll see that all of a sudden the whites are white and the blacks are black, and the tungsten lights do take on that warm cast that you would expect them to, and the scene starts looking fairly natural. So white balance. Make sure that you read a little bit more about it. It's one of those things that you really need to spend a little time with. And speaking of reading, by the way, I would like to point out that each of those cameras came with an instruction manual. This is the very first thing that most of you read when you opened the box, I'm sure. It's great reading. It's 127 pages of just jam-packed information, a fun read, he said, tongue-in-cheek. You'll find that the information in this book, though, is very invaluable to you. And in fact, you'll find most of what I'm telling you within the pages of this book. I would suggest that you do take a moment and sit down at the end of this broadcast or at your earliest opportunity and read the instruction book. That's a sign of a real professional photographer, is someone who has read the instruction book before they needed to. Okay? Let's move on. Talk a little bit more about fluorescent light, because fluorescent light is somewhat tricky. It is a pulsed type of light. That means that you might take a series of shots and actually get 2 or 3 different color renditions. And that's because that light isn't a steady light. It pulses on and off, and you may actually catch it between pulses. Most of the time, though, if you're shooting anywhere from a 30th to about the 60th of a second, you will catch enough of the pulses. You'll actually catch at least 1 or 2 full pulses, and you'll find that you'll end up with an abundance of what is kind of a sickly green color light. By adjusting that white balance setting to the fluorescent, and again, I'm harping on this fluorescent because it will be one of the most difficult lighting situations you'll run into, you can do a great job of correcting that right into the camera and having to do very little post-production work after the fact. Okay, fluorescent lighting. It's really kind of a difficult scenario, but once you get the hang of it and start playing around with it a little bit, and unfortunately you can't just look up at the tube and say, oh, gee, that's fluorescent light. Remember, I told you these lights right here in this studio that I'm setting in look like fluorescent tubes, but they put out a daylight balance of light. I do want to spend some time talking to you about good housekeeping habits. Good housekeeping habits are what will make the camera dependable to you. It'll make your batteries dependable, and at the same time, it will make that camera perform for you when you need it to. First is the battery care, and we spoke about that very early on, making sure that you refresh those batteries on a periodic basis, making sure that you shoot that battery until the half battery indicator rather than topping it off. And I know as photographers, we all have a tendency to want to top that battery off to make sure we've got enough charge. It would be much better for you to carry spare batteries so that you can just simply shoot it through its life until it expires. That will give you the best lifespan out of the battery. One of the other bad habits that we all run into are bad computer habits, and we probably get more calls on our tech service lines, and we'll give you those numbers, by the way, at the end of the broadcast. These tech service lines field an awful lot of calls from people who have lost files or can't find a file or the camera doesn't seem to operate properly, and 99% of the time it's due to bad computer habits. The cards, when you're using them in these cameras, expect to see files on the cards written by the camera. By bad computer habits, I mean people that have a tendency to take that card out of the camera, put it in the computer, mount it as a hard drive in your computer, and then simply take the files off and write them back to the card. That's the problem. The proper way to deal with these images is simply select them all, drag them over to your hard drive somewhere, and park them in a folder. Work with them from within your computer on that folder. Never write them back to that card. If you do that, you'll eliminate about 90% of the possibilities of errors that you might run into. Those cards will stay fresh when you put them back in the camera. Simply format them and move on, and you'll get years and years of life out of these cards. The lifespan on these cards is virtually unlimited. You will notice also that the camera came with a body cap. That body cap is there for a reason. Body cap protects the mirror box and the interior of the camera from dust. Anytime you don't have a lens on the camera, please put that body cap on. The charge-coupled device does have a tendency to build up a static charge. That's the way it works. And once it does build up that static charge, any dust and debris that happens to be in the mirror box when you fire the shutter can get sucked out of it and actually adhere itself to the front of the CCD. Those will show up as black globs on your pictures. And if you see those, all of a sudden, there is an easy cure. There is directions in the camera about cleaning it. Cleaning it with a rubber ear syringe works fine. You don't want to use compressed air and damage the camera. And I'd be very cautious of these spray can devices that also emit the carrier that actually provides the propellant. Use the body cap. That'll eliminate an awful lot of that. Protection from the elements. Anytime that you're working outside, we don't have a choice many times of when we're going to go out and shoot photographs. Anytime you're working outside, a simple protection on a rainy day or a really misty, hazy day of a plastic bag over the camera will certainly exercise the caution that the camera would need in order to make sure that it functions for you properly. These cameras are very durable. They are certainly not waterproof, but they are somewhat water resistant, and given just that little extra care, you'll find that they will perform for you when they need to. Now, we talked about white balance and how nice it was to be able to correct for the proper color, but what if you wanted to uncorrect? What if you didn't want the proper color? In the past, we have been able to put filters on and change the overall color balance of the scene, and that was nice. But you can also, with the white balance setting, purposely pick the wrong setting, and instead of a proper color balance, you could actually exaggerate a color balance. So if you have a warm sunset, for instance, you could warm it up even more. Or if you have a relatively cool scene, you could cool it down even more, as if you had put on a deep amber or a deep blue filter. So if we could go to that graphic, this is a normal rendition of a scene, pretty blue and hazy that day. But by dialing in some towards the tungsten end of the spectrum, we were able to actually exaggerate that and get a little bit creative with it. So do keep in mind that these things are all possible working in this control room in order to enhance the blue light that was there, dialing in a little extra tungsten correction when it wasn't really needed, enhanced that blue light and made it even bluer. So you can make it part of your normal type of routine and get a little bit creative without having to carry a bag full of filters with you at the same time. So that's pretty much it for white balance. We are not going to spend a lot of time today on autofocus control because it's the same as it is on your film cameras. As I said, we're not going to spend much time on things like exposure control because proper exposure is the same whether it's proper exposure for film or proper exposure for a digital camera. Good exposure is still the same good exposure. Shooting a digital camera is very much like shooting a good quality transparency film. So the proper exposure technique would be proper or just a little bit underexposure in order to exaggerate the density and to give you those deep saturated colors. I do want to talk to you about playing back photographs. There are several ways of doing that before we end today. One of the beauties of really shooting digital cameras is the ability to preview what you've done, and there's a couple of different ways you can do that. One, the camera has to be on. And then you'll notice on the left-hand back of the camera there is a thing that looks like a little TV monitor. It's called the monitor button. Anytime you want to preview and look at the last image that you took, you simply hit that button. When you hit that button, you'll find that the LCD on the back of the camera will come alive. If it doesn't, hit it a second time. That just means the camera went to sleep before you hit the button, and it will bring up the last image. By using the dial on the back of the camera, you can then go back and forth between photographs. In that quick preview mode, it does bring up the last photograph that you took. Now, if you want to really review what you've been doing, a second way of looking at photographs is to turn that dial on the left-hand side of the camera to the play position. Once you turn it to the play position, and you do that by holding down that little lock release and just simply turning the collar. Once you get to that, then you can use the thumb pad on the back of the camera, generally used to select your focus spot, to actually preview the photographs and go through them one at a time. If you go up and down, you will go up and down in the stack of photographs. And if you go to the right or the left, you'll actually be able to bring up an overlay of the data that was involved in each of those photographs. Remember, I said it records the date and the time, the file name, records the aperture and the shutter speed and whether or not you used flash. And also, in addition to that, tells you the focal length of the lens. And if it's one of our autofocus lenses, would actually also give you the exact focal length of even a zoom lens. Easy to get to. Just simply hold the dial down, turn it to the play, and then all of a sudden you also get the ability to look at thumbnails. You don't get that when you're just single previewing them, but if you do go into the play mode, it does allow you to use that secondary menus. On that little fold-down trapdoor over the back LCD panel, you'll find that there are secondary menus. They're kind of in a gold color. One of them has a description, a little icon that looks like 9 pictures on the screen. If you hit the WB button, and they correspond to the buttons directly above them, all of a sudden you'll be able to bring up 9 images on the back of the camera at the same time. You can scroll through them by using the command dial and going through them 9 at a time. In other words, pages of 9. And very quickly go through even a rapid number of images on the card. We're going to talk about a few of the custom settings on the camera. The D1 has 31 custom settings. We are not going to go through each one of them. There are 5 or 6 of them that are kind of important to you, and we'll very quickly go through those. They are listed on page 67 of your instruction manual. They start on page 67 and go for several pages, and it will give you a complete description of all of them. The ones that we are going to go through is custom setting number 1. Excuse me. Custom setting number 1, when you're in the single shooting mode, that's single frame shooting. Custom setting number 1 will actually allow you to do your testing before actually recording the image. So if you set custom setting number 1, and custom settings are set by simply holding the CSM button and turning the main command dial, that master command dial, until you get to the number 1. Using the front command dial, you then have options of 0, 1, and 2. 0 being the default, and that means that a photo is not displayed on the LCD panel at all until you command it to come up. Custom setting number 1-1 would allow you what we call capture preview mode, and would allow you to actually look at the image before you actually save it. And I use that a lot when I'm actually testing the camera. If I go into a new situation, I want to check white balance and want to check exposure, I'll set it to custom setting number 1, 1-1. That allows me to bring the image up on the back LCD panel right after it's taken, but before it's actually saved to the card. Custom setting 1-2 does just the opposite. It brings it up on the screen, but at the same time saves it to the card and gives you an option then of hitting a delete button and getting rid of it. In custom setting 1-1, you would have to hit the CSM button if you did decide to save it, and in custom setting 1-2, you would hit the delete button if you decided not to save it. So they are direct opposite. Again, as I said, check page 37 of your instruction manual, and that'll give you a complete rundown on all of these custom settings. The record and review mode is kind of nice. It does allow you to capture the image and then decide not to keep it by simply hitting the delete button. Both of these are just 2 different styles of shooting. One person does prefer one over the other. I do want to warn you that the 1-1 setting is somewhat dangerous, because in the heat of battle and being out there shooting photographs, if you have it in 1-1 and you forget to hit the CSM button, picture is gone forever. So that's kind of a dangerous setting. You could go around thinking you're shooting pictures and find out after the fact that you really haven't been shooting anything, although it does warn you on the screen that you do have to hit it in order to save it. In the record and review mode, of course, at any time you can turn that LCD monitor off by simply touching that monitor button. So after you've reviewed it, just simply hit that button and turn it off. Custom setting number 18 is kind of important. It has 3 or 4 options to it. 0 is the default. It will keep the LCD screen on for 20 seconds. You can increase that to 1, 5, or 10 minutes. A word of warning though, if you do increase it to 10 minutes, keep in mind you are running a TV set from your batteries. So it is going to affect appreciably the life of the battery and therefore how many extra batteries you might want to have with you as a spare. Custom setting 27 is a way of judging exposure. LCD screens in general are not very good for judging exposure. Therefore, we give you a choice of showing not just the image, but also a histogram. The histogram itself is simply a display that shows you every point source of light and how it falls. I'll show you one here in just a second. This setting, by the way, can be found as custom setting 27. It also can be found in that sub-menu command, which in your playback mode, you'll be able to bring up a menu that allows you to set some of these options also. 2 options available on custom setting 27. One of them is a histogram. The other one is a histogram and highlight, either or both. This is what the histogram would look like. When you're in the histogram mode, by the way, you get a quarter display of the photograph, 1 quarter that is then dedicated to the data involved in the photograph, and then the lower half that actually shows you how the exposure falls in that range of to the left being black and to the right being white and everything in between. There is no such thing as a bad histogram. A histogram, as I said, is nothing more than a statistical analysis of every point of light in the photograph. So if you were to take a picture of a gray card or green grass, which is roughly neutral reflectivity, you would expect a histogram that would look somewhat like a bell curve, and that actually does. Keep in mind, if you're shooting something that's very black and very white with very little midtones, you may have 2 spikes, one up the left-hand side and one up the right-hand side. No such thing as a bad histogram. It's just another tool that allows you to judge the exposure because, as I said, LCD screens are not good for judging exposure. Those of you that use laptops know that how you orient your eye to the screen of the laptop determines the brightness and what you see on the screen. That's the same thing with the LCD screen on the camera itself. The highlight section of that histogram highlight part of the custom setting does have the ability to blink any bright light source that is over what we would consider to be normal exposure. So if you get into something that is, it's normal, for instance, if you're shooting a picture inside and there's a window, it would be normal for things outside the window to blink. You wouldn't really be expecting to see detail there anyway. It just shows you that you've gotten to an exposure on that particular part of the scene where nothing is going to have any detail to it. Custom setting 28, I want to warn you about, that's that raw data setting. And we do make it a custom setting that you would have to specifically go to in order to be able to even select the raw data shooting mode. That's actually accomplished with custom setting 28. It has 2 options, off and on. The default, of course, is off so that you can't accidentally shoot files that you wouldn't then be able to look at. A really important custom setting would be custom setting 29. And custom setting 29 gives you what we call sequential file numbering. This is important. Every time you put a card in the camera, the default would be to create exactly the same file names on that card. Now, that's fine until you get ready to move them to your hard drive. Remember, I said the proper way to do it is park them on the hard drive somewhere to work with them. You would have to put them in individual folders. By setting custom setting 29, it gives you sequential numbering so that the next card will pick up with the next number available after the last shot taken on the prior card. This is one that I'm sure you're going to want to set and just set it and leave it, and it will go from 1 to 9,999 and then cycle all the way back to 1. Okay? That way you don't get matching file names and don't inadvertently overwrite files when you transfer them. And then the last custom setting before we go to the break is custom setting 31. That's the one that allows you, when you're set at 1600 ISO, to actually go to 3200 and 6400. Again, a word of caution, the higher ISOs, the less film quality or the less quality to the image, and we'll get to a situation where you may have a lot of noise. Now, as we're getting ready, I think we're just about on time. We want to go to a break. I do want to give you those numbers again. If you haven't emailed Master Sergeant Smith and told her that you're watching, we would appreciate it if you would do that. We also will be coming back in about 10 minutes and taking live phone calls. We would also be happy to take your questions by way of fax. That fax number is DSN 266-3880. The actual call-in number, and we will not start taking these calls until the break, till after the break. And so in about 10 minutes, the number will be active. It'll be 1-800-524-8842. That's 1-800, you see it on the bottom of your screen, 524-8842. Fax number DSN 266-3880. We'll come back for about a half an hour and take live Q&A, and maybe I can help you with some of your questions. Please make use of this time. We'll be happy to help you with any situations that you've run into. Okay, and with that, I think we'd like to take a little 10-minute break here, and then we'll be right back to you at the top of the hour to take those questions and answers. Hi, welcome back. I see we already have a phone call here. I would like to reiterate to you, we will take your live phone calls. The number will periodically show up on your screen. We'll also take your questions by fax, and that number is DSN 266-3880. So if we could connect to that first phone call, please. I see a Master Sergeant Gleckley, is that correct, from Idaho?
Yes, sir.
Good to meet you, sir.
Thank you.
How can I help you today?
Well, the question I had is, the old DCS used to burn out the can. It was safe to do that with these D1s.
Could you back a little bit away from your TV screen there and repeat that question? It was kind of breaking up on this end, sir.
No. The question is it safe to hook up studio flashes to the D1?
The question is it safe to hook up studio flashes to the D1? Yes, it is. The camera does have on the front of it, hidden under a little black plastic cap, has a standard PC terminal socket. That PC terminal socket, by the way, is protected. It has a triac behind it, so you don't have to worry about burning out the camera. A word of caution, though, there are some studio strobes that have a very high trigger voltage. If you plug one of those in, there is an indication that you're going to have a problem when the strobe just repeatedly goes off, but it will not damage the camera. The triac will prevent that circuit from frying. It will fire the strobe. It'll build up a charge. It'll fire the strobe again without you touching the camera. That's an indication that you have a high triggering voltage circuit. We use in our own studios at Nikon in Melville several different brands of strobes, and they are some of the more popular strobes on the market, so I think you're going to find it's going to work real well for you. That answer the question for you?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for calling in. While we're waiting for the next call there, I did have a fax that came in. The fax is from Dennis Goff. Dennis remarks, what is the best way to rename a card full of images to the proper, and I can't quite make that out, to the proper numbers. There are several routines, several pieces of software, usually pieces of shareware, that would allow you to rename images on the fly as you move. Obviously, which ones would be best for you would be dependent upon whether you're using a Mac or a Windows. I happen to use a Windows machine. I use a little piece of shareware, I think it was in the vicinity of about $30 or $40, called Picture Information Extractor. It lets you set up a file name mask with a sequential numbering and simply rename the images as you move them from the card onto the hard drive. So, Mr. Goff, I hope that helps you. I believe that's a Senior Master Sergeant Goff. Thank you for faxing that in. We have a caller from Kentucky now. Mr. Stevenson?
Yes.
Yes. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
You have a question for us today?
Yes, my question is about the LCD device in the back and how it shows an image quite a bit brighter than the image displayed. Is there some way to get that closer?
Actually, there is. The LCD panel on the back, if you check the instruction manual, you'll find that you can actually adjust the brightness of it. What happens is because people are shooting outside, the LCD screen is generally kind of pumped up so that you can see the image in bright sunlight. All of these LCD screens are kind of hard to see when you're out in bright sunlight. It will not give you an accurate rendition of what the file looks like. You remember I spoke about the histogram. The histogram is really the only way of telling what the image looks like. The other thing is that you're looking at the image, the LCD screen is what's known as an RGB device, and yet you're actually recording the image in an NTSC type of format. There is a difference, and what you really need to do is when you bring that image into Adobe Photoshop, you really need to let it convert it to one of the other color spaces like Adobe RGB, which is my personal favorite, or the sRGB color space, and you can set that up in your preferences in Adobe Photoshop. That way, when you bring it over to your computer, it's going to have pretty much that same brightness that you saw when you saw it on the LCD screen on the back of the camera.
Right, I understand.
Okay, does that help you out?
That helps me out. Thank you.
We appreciate you calling in today. Okay. We do have another fax that we got. It's from, doesn't say who it's from, but it's from Michigan. So those of you out there in Michigan that are watching, it says, if I get lost in the custom settings, and there are 31 of them, if I get lost in the custom settings, is there an easy way back? Well, breadcrumbs might be first to come to mind, but yes, there is an easy way back. All of the custom settings can be set back to the original defaults that they came out of the box with by simply holding down the CSM button and the ISO button. And if you look at those two buttons, you'll notice they're green. You simply push both of those buttons in at the same time, hold them for about 3 seconds. You'll see the LCD panel blink. And once it blinks, you'll find that all of your custom settings are back to those original defaults, just like they came out of the box. So that when you turn to page 67 in the instruction manual and you go through them, they will be set exactly at the defaults that you saw in the instruction manual. Sorry they didn't get your name, but I do hope that helped you. We have a Master Sergeant Schulte from Kentucky on the line. Master Sergeant, are you there?
Yes, I am, but it's Missouri, not Kentucky.
I'm sorry, Missouri.
Okay, enjoy your show, first-time caller.
Thank you. First-time presenter.
My question is, I typically use
Could I get you to back away from your TV a little bit there?
Okay, I'm not in front of a TV.
Oh, okay. We're getting a feedback. Let's try that again.
Must be Sergeant Bobby Smith's equipment.
Yeah.
When I typically use a D1, you know what, I faxed my
Yeah, time out there. We're going to try and fix that problem. So if you'll just stay on the line for a second. And while they're doing that, we'll come back to you, so don't go away. We'll do this other fax that came in during the break. It says, according to the instruction manual, the SanDisk and Lexar cards are the only certified cards. Just exactly what does it mean to be certified? That's actually a very good question, because there are a lot of cards out there. The Nikon card is actually made by SanDisk for Nikon. Also, Lexar cards are certified, and these are the solid-state cards that you actually put in the camera. Nice thing about them being solid-state, of course, is that they're very, very dependable. You don't have to worry about kicking them around too much. About the only thing you can do to really ruin them would be to break them in half or to actually drop them in water, and I could tell you a funny story about that, too. Those cards and the certification process are something that the factory gets involved with the manufacturer of the card. And it's a two-way communication street. Certification means to us that we can guarantee to you, the photographer, that the card will work in all of the same situations that the camera is designed to work in. That's the temperature situations and the humidity and all of those places that you might take the camera where you would expect it to work, and we would sort of guarantee that it would work in that type of environment, that we can also add to that the fact that those cards are going to work and be very dependable for you. At the same time, that certification to us from the manufacturer is that they will not arbitrarily make changes to those cards that would affect the operation of the camera without letting us know in plenty of time that we could certainly make arrangements to deal with it on our end. So that certification process is a two-way street. We certify the card to you that it's going to work. They certify to us that they won't arbitrarily make changes, and you're out there dealing with equipment that is really going to work well together in all of those kinds of situations. Now, there are a lot of other cards out there. Does that mean they don't work? No, it does not. It just means that you may get into a situation because of an environmental aspect. You may get into a situation where the card wouldn't be as dependable as we would like to see it. That doesn't mean they won't work in normal situations. There are a lot of cards out there. There are differences in speeds of cards and how fast they write the files. All of those things have to be taken into play. But the truly certified cards are the ones that we can give you that assurance that you're not going to have any problems with them, and be able to track that back to the card not being proper. So I hope that helps. That came into us from California. Again, we didn't get the name on that one. Let's go back to the Master Sergeant. Let's try that again. Master Sergeant Schulte in Missouri. Are you with us? Are you with us? I think he may have hung up. Okay, I do hope you fax that question in to us. We do have one other fax here in the meantime that came in. dealing with the camera connectivity. The question is from Illinois, and it just simply says, highlight camera connectivity. By camera connectivity, I assume you mean connecting it to the computer or connecting it to a TV screen. And yes, you can. There is a little port on the camera. If you open this little rubber door, you will find that there is an AC outlet in here that allows you to actually plug the camera into the wall so that you don't have to rely on battery power. There's also a video out connector, and the camera came with a video connector cable. It has a 1/8" mini jack on one end and I believe RCA plugs on the other. That will actually, and let's see if you can see that a little bit better over here. These two little ports right here on the side. See if we get the light on it just right. Hard to see. There they are right there. That allows you to actually connect it to a TV monitor. And there are custom settings. When you go through that custom setting list, you'll find that there are custom settings that will allow you to not only connect it to the standard NTSC format over here, but also if you are in Europe, it will allow you to connect it to the PAL setting. That's built into the camera. Obviously, it's a worldwide camera, and by simply changing that setting, you can connect it pretty much anywhere you are in the world. I do see that we have a Tech Sergeant Brooks from DC on the line. Are you with us, sir? Tech Sergeant Brooks? Can't hear you. No. Just barely.
Okay, well, what I try to do is...
Okay, I had you there for just a second. Start over again, please.
Okay, my question is, you had mentioned the compact flash cards, and we just recently had an assignment with dealing with the inauguration. And my concern is, are you totally against the micro drives? We were using the 1 gig type. What is your advice on that?
Okay, I think I got enough of that to attempt an answer at it. Yeah, I'll repeat that question because I don't think the viewers out there got a chance to see it. You were dealing with the inauguration, I believe, just a week or so ago, and of course we were down there doing a lot of work with a lot of the press. I believe the question was concerning the microdrive cards, and in particular the 1 gigabyte card. That card is not certified in the D1, nor is the 340. For those of you that aren't familiar with what the microdrive cards are, it's a product made by IBM, and they're little miniature hard drives. They're a little bit different than a compact flash card in the sense that they do have moving parts. They're a spinning little hard drive. Not certified, although we have been working very closely with the IBM people in hopes of certifying some of their cards. Their latest card that has recently come out is a 1 gigabyte, so you can imagine the tremendous storage space that would be available to you having a whole gigabyte on a card this size. It's about twice this thickness. Camera is set up to take, that's a Type 2 card, and the camera is already set up to take that thickness. But that particular card at present is not certified. As I said, we are working with IBM in hopes of being able to do that. They make a good product. We just haven't been able to come to an agreement that we can feel comfortable certifying that card yet. I do know some people out there trying to use them. I would use them with caution only from the standpoint that images lost, of course, you wouldn't be able to go back and recover, and that could be a problem for you. I hope that answered it for you. You're very welcome. Thank you. I think we are having a little audio problem there. Let me give you that fax number again. For those of you that would like to fax us real quick, they are running these into me as they come in. That fax number is DSN266, and there you see it on the screen, 3880. Be happy to entertain your questions. We have about 15 minutes yet. If that will be of help to you, we certainly would like to help you out. I'm just told that we are having audio problems and that we will not be able to take any more phone calls in, but the fax machine certainly is working well. So if you will, instead of calling, just simply put those on the fax machine. They do have people running them back and forth here from the fax machine to the studio. In the meantime, I guess we could look at some pictures. Want to give you Mavi's email. Those of you that were watching and didn't get a chance yet to to let us know that you were watching the Nikon broadcast today. If you would drop an email to Mavi Smith, Master Sergeant Mavi Smith, at that email address you see on the screen, and let us know that you were out there watching. Do us a favor, please, in the subject line, put only the words Nikon broadcast. That will help sort that email. You know, the other thing that you could do, since we do have a moment here, one of the things that we would like to know, and I'm sure that the Air National Guard would like to know, if you found the program today to be helpful and interesting to you, and you have other subjects, photographic subjects, perhaps dealing with Nikon equipment or the usage of our equipment, perhaps flash or something like that, which we didn't really touch on much today. If you do have that type of question and would like to see a program, if you think there's material there that you'd like to see a program done on it, again, if you would email Master Sergeant Smith here and let her know, she will certainly pass that on to us. We're anxious to work with you folks out there. The D1 we think is going to be quite an asset in your equipment locker. And if you would let us know what we can do to help you, we'd certainly be glad to try. Master Sergeant Smith, you want to go to some photographs here while we're waiting for the next fax to come in? Okay, we have, I'm going to be running, I'll call it a slideshow, although a slideshow is usually photographs that are related to each other. These are not. These are simply images out of the D1 that have been taken by some of the Nikon tech reps over the past few months, myself included. We have a staff of professionals out there. Everybody in the department at one time or another was a photographer. That's kind of a requirement to get the job. And what we're going to show you here are just a collection of some of their better images, and they run the gamut from everything. You'll see some airplane stuff and flowers and bugs and all sorts of things. So if we could just run some of those images, we'll kill a little time here while we're waiting for the faxes to come in. Okay, we've got a couple of faxes here in the meantime. This one is from the Missouri Air National Guard, addressed to Nikon Dude. Thank you very much. Actually, because I said that, I won't actually say who sent the fax in because that might not be cool. Is there any way to change the resolution in fine mode from 72 DPI to 300 DPI? I know what you're referring to there. That's the resolution in Photoshop when you open the file, and you notice that it opens at an extremely large size but at a lower resolution. No way that I know of. That's just the native way that it gets translated over into Photoshop. This is a question that might be a little bit better addressed by somebody from Photoshop, because I would personally like to be able to do that myself. It would save me a lot of time if I could just automatically import it and have it come up at the standard size of 300 DPI. So sorry, unfortunately I can't. All files, when you open them up in Photoshop, will be really big, about 18 by 30 some inches at 72 DPI instead of the 8 by 10 at 300 that we would like to see. Second part of that question, how come I have to use Nikon DX acquiring software to drag images from the flash card to Photoshop? I'd prefer to acquire directly from Photoshop. You don't have to. In fact, you don't acquire these images at all. All you have to do is simply select them. You would mount that flash card in on your computer, perhaps in a card reader. That's what I would generally do. And then you simply go to that card, select them, drag them over to the hard drive, and drop them in a folder over there. In order to open them, do not acquire them. Simply go to the File menu and go down to Open, File, Open, and then you can actually multiply select more than one image in Photoshop by holding down the Control key. Shift would allow you to do consecutive files, but Control key would allow you to bump through several different files, and you can open them depending on the amount of memory that you have. I do hope that helps. Don't acquire them. These are not this type of files. You had to acquire files out of your older DCS cameras, and they may have had a Nikon body on them, but they were actually made by Kodak. The Kodak DCS cameras, the software, the file was actually processed outside the camera. And because of that, the acquire module, as you would acquire them, it would actually process the image. The files that come out of the D1 are fully finished in the camera, 3 different levels of JPEG and 2 different levels of TIFF, and you simply open them. Do not acquire them. Hope that helps. From Senior Master Sergeant John Chapman at the Indiana Air National Guard. Getting back to the first question referencing studio lights, my photo studio has Bogen Pro Light 60s. When I plug the sync cord in, I get a quick flash. What kind of studio lights do you recommend? I don't recommend any particular studio lights. We use a combination of Dynalights. We've certainly had some Bogen product. The quick flash that you get, I'm wondering, is just simply the shorting out of the sync cord as you plug it in. It doesn't say whether it repeatedly flashes. If it doesn't repeatedly flash, then you would simply make sure you plug the sync cord in while the strobe is not on, and then of course you wouldn't get that flash. Excuse me, I hope that helps. As I said, we use Dynalights, but we've used Bogens, and we've used most of the regular pro studio lights that are out there on the market. And we do have another fax here. Do you need to use a hot mirror filter on the D1? And this is from Montana. No, you do not need to use a hot mirror filter on the D1. A hot mirror filter was designed by the Tiffin folks for the Kodak DCS cameras. This camera, the CCD has built in front of, in direct proximity and in front of the CCD, a low-pass lithium niobate filter. That's a fancy word of saying that a filter that takes care of all of this infrared cutoff and a lot of other things, including making sure that fine detail is rendered properly. So a hot mirror filter has absolutely no effect on a D1, and I know that for a fact because I've tried it with and without, just to make sure. No, you do not need a hot mirror filter. So that goes out to you there in Montana. I hope that answers that for you. Okay, we're about to wrap up here. I would again like to, let me find my little sheet right here. I would like for you to give us some input. One, I need you to let Master Sergeant Smith know that you were out there in the audience watching today. You can do that by sending her an email to the address on the screen that you see right there below me. That address in the subject line, just simply put Nikon Broadcast. At the same time, again, I would like to solicit your comments about other programs that you might like to see Nikon do in conjunction with the D1 and with the photographic techniques that are possible with the camera. So if you'd give us kind of an idea of what your needs are, we certainly would be happy to take that back to our place and sit down and get our heads together and see if we can't come up with some interesting programs for you to help you really get acquainted with this camera and see it produce for you the kinds of files and the kinds of pictures that we know the camera is capable of taking, and especially in hands of great photographers like some of you folks. I was here yesterday when they were judging some of the Air National Guard Photographer of the Year contest, and had the opportunity of seeing some absolutely incredible photographs come in from out there. And in fact, I hope some of you folks are watching today. I was very impressed with the quality of the work that I saw. So we're looking forward to you guys and gals out there getting the D1 out into the workplace and out into the field and coming up with those images and seeing them show up as next year's Photographer of the Year. So I guess that'll wrap it up for us. I'm Bill Pacala. I work for Nikon Professional Services, and I appreciate your time today. I hope the program was of interest to you, and we appreciate your time and joining us today. Thank you very much.